The first sign that something was wrong came when Earth's most advanced satellites detected a strange signal. It wasn't just any signal. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered before. The signal seemed to be coming from the farthest reaches of the universe, a place where even the most powerful telescopes could barely catch a glimpse. At first, the world's top scientists thought it was some kind of cosmic anomaly, maybe a burst of radiation or a mistake from one of their own satellites. But as days passed, it became clear that this was something much more serious. The signal grew stronger, more deliberate, and it was impossible to ignore. Governments scrambled to decipher its meaning. The signal was not in any known language, not even close. It was more like a sequence of frequencies, a pattern that seemed to evolve as if it were alive, communicating with Earth. Specialists from every corner of the globe worked around the clock, poring over the data to find answers. Tensions mounted as people began to speculate. What could it mean? Was this a message of peace, or was Earth being threatened by something far more powerful? After several days of analysis, the experts finally made a breakthrough. They managed to decode the message, and when it was translated, the world froze in terror. The words that appeared on every screen across the globe were simple yet chilling, because until now, you have believed in your freedom on this world. We will bring you under our command. For a moment, everything went silent. It was a warning, a declaration of power, and it came from a force far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. There was no sign of aggression, no immediate attack, just a cold, calculating message that sent a shiver down the spine of every person who heard it. But the warning was just the beginning. It wasn't long before the skies over the world's largest cities began to change. First, it was subtle, a flicker in the sky, like a disturbance in the air. Then, without any further warning, massive ships appeared. They didn't land. They simply hovered, dark and foreboding, casting long shadows over the earth below. These ships were enormous, far larger than anything humanity could imagine. Their sleek, metallic surfaces shimmered in the sunlight, and their shapes were unlike anything seen in human design. No one could fathom the technology behind them. It was clear that these were not just any alien ships. They were advanced beyond human comprehension. Panic spread like wildfire. Military forces were put on high alert, and world leaders gathered in secret to discuss how to respond. The question on everyone's mind was the same. What did the aliens want? And more importantly, how could humanity possibly defend itself? Among the chaos, one name began to stand out: Major Ben Roy. He was a young, determined commander, and despite being in charge of a small unit, he was known for his quick thinking and unwavering courage. Roy was no stranger to combat, but this was different. This wasn't a fight against other nations or rogue factions. This was an enemy from the stars, an enemy with technology that made Earth's best weapons seem like toys. As Roy sat in the command center, watching the massive alien ships loom over the horizon on the screens, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Earth was in danger, and the situation seemed impossible. His small unit, stationed on the outskirts of a major city, had little chance of standing against the alien invasion. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Roy felt a fire in his chest. He knew that if humanity was going to survive this, it would have to fight. There was no other choice. He looked around the room at his team, soldiers who had trained their whole lives for something like this, yet none of them had ever imagined they would face something so terrifying. They were scared, but they were also determined. They knew that Earth was not going down without a fight. "Prepare for deployment," Roy commanded, his voice calm but firm. "We don't know what we're up against, but we do know one thing. We're not going to let them take our world without a fight. It's our planet, and we're going to defend it to the last man." His team moved quickly, readying their gear and preparing for the worst. The sense of fear in the air was palpable, but there was also something else, a sense of unity. The entire world was in danger, but for the first time in a long while, humanity was coming together, united in a common cause. This wasn't about politics, race, or borders. This was about survival. It was about protecting their home. Meanwhile, the alien ships above Earth remained silent, their presence growing more ominous by the minute. People all over the world could see them now, hovering like giants in the sky, as if they were watching, waiting for something. The quiet before the storm was deafening. Every second felt like an eternity, and the world held its breath. Roy and his team, though nervous, were ready. They knew that this battle was bigger than them. It wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the aliens that Earth wouldn't kneel, that humanity would fight to protect its freedom, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as the world waited for the first move to be made. Then, without warning, a low hum filled the atmosphere. The alien ships began to move, their engines activating in a low, menacing growl. It was time. The invasion had begun. Major Roy stood in the command center, his mind racing. There was no plan for this. No strategy, no preparation. The world had never seen an enemy like this before. Yet, in that moment, something shifted in him. A realization. The aliens may have more power, more technology, but humanity had something they didn't: a will to survive, a spirit that couldn't be crushed. They would fight, and they would not go down without one hell of a battle. The world was about to change forever. And Major Ben Roy was ready to lead the charge. The first wave of the alien invasion was nothing like anything humanity had ever faced. The alien forces came with overwhelming power, their advanced AI-driven weapons, and nearly impenetrable shields easily overpowering Earth's defenses. The cloaking technology they used to hide their ships made it impossible to detect them until they were already overhead. And when they revealed themselves, they attacked with ruthless precision. The first targets were Earth's largest cities: New York, Tokyo, London, and Paris. The world watched in horror as these once thriving metropolises were reduced to rubble by the alien ships. The aliens didn't give humanity any time to think, to organize, or to strategize. They didn't need to. With their superior technology, the Earth's military forces had no chance against the alien onslaught. Missiles, lasers, and heavy artillery fired into the skies, but they all failed to make a dent in the enemy ships. The sheer size of the alien vessels, combined with their impenetrable shields, made them virtually unstoppable. It was like fighting shadows. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, humanity wasn't ready to give up just yet. In a remote military base, Major Ben Roy watched the live feeds of the destruction unfolding on Earth's largest cities. The helplessness in the eyes of the civilians, the chaos in the streets. It was all too much to bear, but he knew he couldn't let that stop him. He had been training for moments like this, though no one could have predicted the scale of the disaster. There had to be something humanity could do to fight back. He looked around at his small team of soldiers, all of them as stunned as he was by the alien strength, but they still had hope. That hope hadn't been shattered yet. "We might be small, but we're not out," Major Roy said, his voice steady, though his heart raced with fear and anticipation. "We have our mission, and we're going to make it count." His team nodded in agreement, although they were all well aware of the incredible risk involved. They didn't have the firepower or the numbers to win. What they had was determination, and if there was a way to turn the tide, it had to start with them. Ben Roy and his team had just one small ship, a military vessel called the Falcon. It wasn't anything compared to the massive alien ships in the sky, but it was fast, maneuverable, and heavily armed for its size. The Falcon wasn't designed to take on a fleet of invaders, but in this moment of desperation, it might be their only chance. "We're going to make a counterattack," Major Roy said firmly, setting the plan into motion. "We may not be able to defeat them head-on, but we'll find a way to strike back." As they prepared for the mission, the weight of the situation pressed down on them. The world was burning, and they were about to launch their first attack against an enemy that had destroyed entire cities in a matter of hours. They weren't going in with a guarantee of survival, but they couldn't afford to sit back and wait for the inevitable. They had to act. The moment they launched from the base, the air around them seemed to thicken with the pressure of the unknown. As the Falcons sped through the sky, Major Roy's heart pounded in his chest. They were going straight into enemy territory. The alien ships were just above the clouds, cloaked and invisible, but Roy had a feeling that they were watching, waiting for any signs of resistance. The Falcons' advanced cloaking technology helped them evade detection, but they couldn't rely on it for long. "We need to get close enough to make a real strike," Roy said, his eyes glued to the radar screen. "We'll use their own cloaking tech against them. We'll need to hit hard, and we'll need to do it fast." As the Falcon got closer to the enemy lines, Major Roy could feel the tension rise. The plan was risky, but it was all they had. They approached a massive alien ship, one of the leaders in the fleet, undetected for now. It was their only chance to inflict any real damage. But just as they neared the ship, something unexpected happened. The ship suddenly flickered and deactivated its cloaking. The aliens had detected them, and now they were preparing to retaliate. Before Major Roy could issue any orders, the ship fired a powerful energy blast. The Falcon rocked violently, alarms blaring throughout the cabin, as the crew struggled to maintain control. "We're taking fire," yelled one of the soldiers. "Hang on," Major Roy shouted, gripping the controls as tightly as he could. "Get us closer. We need to disable their shield system." With every second that passed, it felt like their chances of survival were slipping away. The aliens were relentless, and the Falcon's shields were beginning to falter. They were outgunned, outmatched, and yet they kept pushing forward. This was their only shot at striking back. But in the chaos of the attack, something unexpected happened. Captain Bonner, Major Roy's closest friend and one of the most experienced soldiers in the team, did something no one had anticipated. As the ship was taking heavy damage and Roy's team struggled to hold their ground, Bonner made a split-second decision. He knew that if they didn't act quickly, the Falcon would be destroyed. And if they didn't disable the alien ship's shields now, they would have no chance of survival. "I'll do it," Bonner said, looking Roy straight in the eyes. Before Roy could stop him, Bonner unstrapped himself from his seat, grabbed a weapon, and ran to the ship's hatch. Without hesitation, he opened it and jumped into the chaos of the open sky. "Captain!" "No," Roy screamed. But it was too late. Bonner had already made up his mind. He knew the risk, and he was willing to sacrifice everything for the mission. The soldiers inside the Falcon watched in shock as Bonner moved towards the enemy ship's vulnerable points. He fought through enemy fire, his courage and determination driving him forward. He planted explosive charges on the ship's shield generators, but as he was making his way back to the Falcon, the alien ship fired a fatal shot. Bonner was hit. His body was torn apart in an instant, his sacrifice ensuring the Falcon's survival, but at a devastating cost. The rest of the team watched in horror as Bonner's lifeless body floated in space. Major Roy's heart sank. Bonner was more than a comrade. He was a friend, someone he trusted with his life. And now he was gone. It was a crushing blow to the team. Bonner's sacrifice had given them a chance to escape, but it had come at the cost of his life. Major Roy could feel the anger rising inside him. But along with it, something else. A new sense of purpose. Bonner had given his life so that they could keep fighting. Now, it was up to them to carry on his legacy. "We'll make them pay for this," Major Roy vowed, his voice filled with quiet fury. For Bonner. For Earth. The team moved forward, their resolve strengthened by the loss of their friend. Bonner's death had ignited something in all of them, a fire that would not be extinguished until they had taken back their world. The first counterattack had been a failure in terms of military success, but it had shown them something far more important. Humanity's determination could never be crushed. And now, the war had truly begun. As the war between humanity and the alien forces intensified, Earth's hope seemed to be fading. Cities lay in ruins, and countless lives had been lost. The alien invaders were not only technologically superior, but also appeared to know humanity's every move, thanks to their advanced AI systems. Major Roy and his team had taken some heavy losses, but they refused to give up. They had one last weapon, a weapon that had been hidden for years, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. Unknown to most of the world, Earth had developed a secret weapon in the years before the invasion. It was a highly classified project that had remained under wraps, even from the highest levels of government. This weapon wasn't a massive fleet of ships or devastating missiles. It was something far more subtle but equally dangerous. It was an AI-driven nanobot army, capable of infiltrating and dismantling enemy systems at the microscopic level. The nanobots had been hidden away in the Earth's vast jungles and oceans, far from the reach of the alien forces. The plan had been to deploy them only in the event of an all-out war, but now the time had come. Major Roy and his team were the ones tasked with activating this secret weapon. The nanobots, tiny and almost invisible to the naked eye, could be activated by a series of coordinates hidden in an encrypted system. The team had spent weeks tracking down the location of the activation codes, which had been buried deep in the jungles of South America. It was a dangerous mission, but there was no choice. Humanity's last hope rested on these tiny machines. As Roy and his team made their way through dense, unfamiliar terrain, the weight of their mission pressed heavily on them. They had to reach the hidden control center in time, or the invasion would be unstoppable. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. It wasn't just a mission anymore. It was Earth's future hanging in the balance. "We're almost there," Major Roy said, his voice steady but laced with the tension of the moment. "Once we activate the nanobots, we'll have a chance. But we need to be fast. The aliens are tracking us." The team moved quickly, knowing that they were running out of time. The alien forces were relentless, their sensors able to detect any anomaly in the atmosphere or terrain. If they were caught, the mission would fail, and Earth would have no hope left. The nanobots could only work if they were deployed without interference, which meant they needed to remain undetected by the alien surveillance systems. When they finally reached the control center, a hidden underground facility surrounded by thick jungle, Major Roy and his team set to work immediately. The control room was cold and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. As Major Roy entered the final sequence to activate the nanobots, his mind raced. Would it work? Would the aliens notice the sudden change and launch an attack? Suddenly, the warning lights flashed, and a chilling sound filled the room. "The aliens have detected the activation," one of Roy's team members shouted. "They've already found us." Before they could even respond, the facility's doors exploded open, and a squad of alien troops stormed in. The team barely had time to react. With a quick, coordinated move, Major Roy's soldiers opened fire, but the aliens were fast, their energy shields making them nearly impervious to conventional weapons. "We need to hold them off," Major Roy shouted as he and his team fought back. "Get the nanobots online. Don't let them stop us." The room erupted in chaos as both sides exchanged fire. Major Roy was right in the thick of it, leading his team with determination. His soldiers were holding their ground, but the alien troops were pushing back hard. Every shot they fired seemed to be a desperate plea for survival. Time was running out. In the midst of the firefight, one of Major Roy's closest soldiers, Sergeant Adams, was hit. He collapsed to the ground, his face twisted in pain. Roy's heart sank, but he didn't have time to process it. He knew the mission was bigger than any single soldier. They had to succeed, no matter the cost. "We're almost there," one of the tech specialists on Roy's team yelled over the comms. Just a few more seconds. The aliens were relentless, and the pressure was unbearable. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, the nanobots were activated. The tiny machines began to spread out, traveling through the Earth's networks, infiltrating the alien systems. It was a slow process, but it was working. The aliens had no idea that their own systems were being corrupted from within. Major Roy knew this was their only chance. The nanobots would give Earth a fighting chance, but the aliens wouldn't sit idly by. Just as the nanobots began their work, a massive explosion shook the building. The aliens had set a trap. Their forces were closing in, and the facility was beginning to collapse. Roy's team was under full assault, but they had no choice but to fight for their lives and for the future of humanity. In the chaos, Major Roy's team fought with everything they had. They moved in close quarters, using their knowledge of the terrain and the alien weaknesses to their advantage. The battle raged on, but Roy couldn't afford to lose sight of the bigger picture. The nanobots were working, and that was their key to survival. "We're holding them off, but we need to get out of here," one of the soldiers yelled. "No, we stay until the job is done," Roy replied firmly. "This is our chance to win." The soldiers fought on, but the pressure was mounting. They were losing ground, and casualties were mounting. But as they continued to push back against the alien assault, the first signs of success began to emerge. The alien systems were faltering. Their shields were weakening, their weapons misfiring. The nanobots had infiltrated the aliens' central command systems, and their once invincible technology was now being sabotaged from within. Major Roy's heart raced as he watched the alien forces struggle to maintain control. It wasn't over yet, but Earth's hidden weapon was starting to show its power. The aliens were losing control of their own machines, their own defenses. With the last of his team holding their ground, Major Roy issued the final command: "Prepare for extraction. We've done our part. Now, let's get out of here." But as they made their way toward the extraction point, the final wave of alien troops arrived. It was a desperate battle, and Major Roy's soldiers fought until their last breath. Sergeant Adams, despite his injuries, kept fighting by Roy's side, his will to survive as strong as ever. The final moments were a blur of gunfire, explosions, and smoke. Major Roy and his team fought to the end, but the toll had been heavy. They had lost good men, brave soldiers who had sacrificed everything for humanity's survival. As the team finally made it to the extraction point, Major Roy's mind was flooded with thoughts of the soldiers they had lost and the war that was far from over. But one thing was clear: the nanobots had given Earth a chance. The aliens might have been able to crush cities, but they couldn't fight against an army of tiny machines that could infiltrate their systems and destroy them from within. "We've made a difference today," Major Roy whispered, looking out at the battlefield. "But this is just the beginning." As they escaped the battlefield, they knew that humanity had a new weapon in its arsenal. The war was far from over, but now, at least, humanity had a fighting chance. The war between Earth and the alien forces was reaching a breaking point. The skies were constantly filled with the thunderous roar of alien warships, and the surface of the planet was scared by the relentless battle. Humanity was fighting for its survival, but with each passing day, it seemed like the aliens were gaining the upper hand. Their advanced technology, nearly impenetrable shields, and armies of robotic soldiers made them nearly invincible. No matter how much Earth's forces pushed back, the aliens always seemed to have an answer, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to hold the line. But in the face of overwhelming odds, Major Roy and his team refused to back down. Their spirits were not broken, and their determination burned brighter than ever. They had already lost so much, but they knew the cost of failure. The stakes had never been higher, and Earth's last hope rested on their shoulders. With each small victory, they were starting to see a flicker of light in the darkness. Under Major Roy's leadership, the humans had managed to carve out a small foothold in the alien-controlled zones. The fight was brutal, and every inch of ground they gained came at a steep price. The alien forces were relentless, and their eye-controlled war machines were always one step ahead, countering every move Earth's forces made. But Major Roy's team had something that the aliens didn't: heart. The human spirit was a force that no amount of technology could defeat. The tension was thick as Major Roy stood in the command center, watching the battle unfold. His soldiers were engaged in fierce skirmishes with the alien forces, trying to hold their ground as they prepared for the next wave of attacks. He was focused, calm, and determined, but deep down, he knew the aliens would not give up easily. They had come for Earth with one purpose: to dominate. "We need to push harder," Major Roy muttered under his breath. "We can't let them get comfortable." His team, though battle-weary, was still ready to fight. There was a quiet strength in their eyes, a resolve that was stronger than anything the aliens could throw at them. But in the midst of this hope, Major Roy's worst fear came true. The warning came over the comms, a message from one of his soldiers, Private Sarah, who had been positioned on the front lines. She was reporting a sudden alien ambush, and it was bad. The alien forces had found their weak point and were closing in fast. Major Roy's heart sank as he heard the desperation in Sarah's voice. "Major Roy, they're everywhere. We need—" The comms cut off abruptly, followed by the sound of gunfire and explosions. Major Roy's stomach twisted in knots. His instincts told him it was too late. The ambush had been swift and deadly. He didn't even have to wait for the next report to know what had happened. Private Sarah, one of the most promising soldiers on his team, was gone. Without hesitation, Major Roy grabbed his weapon and motioned to his team. "We move now. We're not leaving anyone behind." They rushed to the coordinates Sarah had last transmitted, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. As they approached the ambush site, they found the remains of Sarah's squad. Alien forces were everywhere, their robotic soldiers relentless as they searched for survivors. But amid the chaos, one figure stood out. It was Sarah. She had fallen, but not before she had done something incredible. Sarah's final act had been one of self-sacrifice. In her last moments, she had set off an explosive charge, taking down a significant portion of the alien forces and giving the rest of the team a chance to escape. The blast had given Major Roy and his soldiers a window to regroup and strike back, but it had cost Sarah her life. The sight of her sacrifice hit Major Roy hard. He had seen death before, but this was different. Sarah wasn't just a soldier. She was a symbol of everything that humanity stood for in this war. She had given everything for the cause, and her death was a painful reminder of the price of victory. Major Roy felt the weight of it all on his shoulders. As the team regrouped, they stood in silence for a moment, the reality of the situation settling in. Major Roy's thoughts were clouded with grief, but he knew he couldn't afford to stop. The war was still far from over, and they needed to keep pushing forward. But Sarah's sacrifice had ignited a fire within him, one that burned hotter than ever before. "We're not giving up," Major Roy said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We'll make them pay for this. For Sarah. For everyone we've lost. We'll end this, once and for all." His team nodded, their resolve solidifying. They were no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for the memory of their fallen comrades, and they were fighting for a future where humanity could stand strong once again. The battle ahead would not be easy, but they were ready. They regrouped, and Major Roy knew that the time had come for their final strike. The aliens had been relentless, but they had underestimated humanity's will to survive. The loss of Sarah had strengthened their resolve, and now they were more determined than ever to finish what they had started. "We're going after their main AI core," Major Roy said, his voice filled with conviction. "We destroy that, and the aliens lose their power. We hit them hard, and we don't stop until the job is done." The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. The alien AI core was the heart of their operation, controlling their fleets, their shields, and their weapons. If they could destroy it, they would cripple the entire alien invasion force. But getting to it wouldn't be easy. The AI core was located in the heart of the alien command ship, deep within enemy territory, heavily guarded by robotic soldiers and advanced defenses. As Major Roy and his team made their way to the final mission, their nerves were at an all-time high. This was it, the turning point. They had nothing left to lose. Every step they took was a step closer to victory. but also to their possible doom. They knew the risks, but they also knew that failure wasn't an option. In the final moments before they launched their assault on the alien core, Major Roy stood with his team, looking each one of them in the eyes. They were all ready for whatever came next. "We do this for Sarah," Major Roy said quietly, "and for the future of Earth." As they boarded their ships and prepared for the final strike, Major Roy knew that the war had reached its turning point. The next few hours would determine the fate of humanity. But no matter what happened, one thing was clear: they would fight with everything they had. The final mission had arrived. Major Roy and his team stood in the command center, looking at the star maps and the schematics of the alien command ship. This was it, the last chance to end the war and save humanity. Their target was the alien AI core, the heart of the invasion. It controlled the alien forces, their warships, their robotic soldiers, and their advanced shields. Without it, the aliens would be powerless. But getting to the core was no easy task. The mission was practically a suicide run. The alien command ship was heavily guarded by cloaked ships, advanced robots, and the most dangerous AI-driven defenses. Every move they made would be met with a counterattack, and they knew that many would not survive the journey. Still, Major Roy and his soldiers had made up their minds. They would fight until the end. The stakes were too high to back down. "We know what's at risk," Major Roy said, looking around at his team. "But we also know that if we don't stop this now, we'll lose everything. We fight for Earth. We fight for those who aren't here with us. We fight for a future." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Every soldier in that room knew the gravity of the situation. The time for hesitation had passed. The time for action was now. The team boarded their ships, preparing for the most dangerous mission of their lives. As they launched into space, the calm of the void surrounded them. The stars sparkled in the distance, but the silence was deceiving. They were about to enter the most intense battle of the war. The alien forces were ready for them. The skies above Earth were now filled with the shadows of cloaked alien ships, their sleek forms almost invisible against the backdrop of space. But Major Roy and his team were prepared. They had been through hell and back. They had lost so much, but they had gained one thing: the will to fight. The moment their ships entered the alien territory, all hell broke loose. The first wave of cloaked alien warships decloaked and opened fire, their lasers cutting through the void with deadly precision. The sheer power of their weapons was enough to tear through most human ships in seconds. Major Roy's ship, the Falcon, rocked as a barrage of alien fire hit its shields. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, but the shields held strong. "Brace yourselves," Major Roy shouted as the crew scrambled to maintain control. "We're in for a hell of a ride." The battle that followed was a blur of flashing lights, explosions, and the shrill screams of alarms. Major Roy's team fought back with everything they had, firing their weapons, dodging enemy fire, and trying to stay one step ahead of the alien forces. Their ships moved through space like ghosts, darting between bursts of enemy fire, returning fire with laser beams and missiles. But it wasn't enough. The alien ships were too many, their technology too advanced. One by one, the human ships were destroyed. Explosions lit up the void, sending debris flying through space. The sound of gunfire echoed in the emptiness as human and alien forces clashed in a brutal struggle for dominance. Major Roy watched in horror as his comrades fell, their ships consumed by the alien firepower. He saw his close friend, Lieutenant Mason, fighting bravely until the end. He saw Corporal Drake's ship disintegrate in a fiery explosion, taking him with it. "Stay focused." Major Roy's voice cut through the chaos, his tone sharp. "We have a mission to complete." The team pressed on, each member determined to see the mission through. Despite the losses, they knew they couldn't afford to give up. They had come too far. The alien AI core was still within reach, and they couldn't stop now. As they neared the alien command ship, they were met with even fiercer resistance. The alien defenses were unlike anything they had faced before. Automated turrets, swarms of drones, and even larger robotic monsters attacked them with a terrifying precision. The humans fought valiantly, but the aliens' numbers seemed endless. "We're almost there," Major Roy said, gritting his teeth as his hands gripped the controls of the Falcon. Just a little further. The battle raged on as they made their final push towards the heart of the alien ship. Major Roy's ship was damaged, its hull cracked and leaking air, but it was still functional. His crew was tired, their bodies and minds stretched to their limits, but they knew they had to keep going. "Prepare for boarding," Major Roy commanded. "We're taking this fight to the AI core." As they landed on the alien command ship, the team was met by a barrage of alien fire. They jumped out of their ships, weapons raised, and sprinted towards the ship's core. The halls of the alien command ship were cold and sterile, the walls lined with alien technology that hummed with a quiet, menacing energy. The sound of clanging metal and the roar of explosions filled the air as the humans fought through wave after wave of robotic soldiers. The closer they got to the AI core, the more intense the battle became. The alien robots were everywhere, and their sheer strength and numbers made them almost impossible to defeat. But Major Roy and his team were undeterred. They fought with everything they had, using their weapons, their tactics, and their willpower to push forward. At last, they reached the heart of the ship, the AI core. It was a massive, glowing structure, pulsing with energy. Major Roy's heart raced as he approached it. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. "We're here," Major Roy said, his voice steady. "It's time to end this." As he reached for the detonator, the ground beneath them shook. The aliens were making one final desperate attempt to stop them. Waves of energy shot towards them, and the room was filled with flashing lights and blinding beams of power. The team fought back, their weapons firing as fast as they could reload. But despite the odds, Major Roy remained focused. With a final decisive move, Major Roy activated the detonator. The explosion was immense. The AI core erupted in a flash of light, sending shockwaves through the entire ship. The alien forces' control over their war machines and ships was instantly severed. The once impenetrable alien defense systems went dark. The alien warships in orbit above Earth suddenly lost power, drifting helplessly in space. For the first time in weeks, the battle was over. The alien forces were in chaos. Their ships, once an unstoppable force, were now helpless. Earth had won. The humans had suffered tremendous losses, but in the end, their bravery, their unity, and their unyielding will to survive had triumphed. Major Roy and his team had achieved the impossible. They had destroyed the alien AI core, and with it, the aliens' ability to control their invasion forces. As Major Roy looked around, he saw the destruction, the bodies of his fallen comrades, and the empty silence of space. The price of victory had been steep, but it had been worth it. Earth was free. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. They had saved humanity. The war was over. The war was over. Earth had won. It was a victory that would be remembered for centuries, a victory that had cost more than anyone could imagine. But it was a victory nonetheless. The alien forces, once a looming threat, were now retreating. They had been defeated by the courage, resilience, and determination of humanity. Major Roy and his team had led the charge, but they had paid a heavy price. The sacrifices made were immeasurable. Earth had survived, but the cost of survival had been steep. Major Roy stood on the command deck, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The battle was over, but the weight of the victory still hung heavy in the air. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. The world outside had changed forever, but the pain of the losses was still fresh. His comrades, his friends, had given their lives to secure this peace. He thought of Bonner, who had been the first to fall in the battle for Earth. He thought of Sarah, who had sacrificed herself to save her team during the alien ambush. He thought of all the soldiers who had fought bravely, only to never return home. "We did it," Major Roy whispered to himself, though the words felt hollow. He couldn't shake the feeling that the victory had come at too high a price. The memorial service was held for the fallen soldiers, a somber ceremony where Earth's leaders and military officials gathered to honor those who had given their lives. Major Roy stood at the front, his eyes scanning the faces of those who had been left behind. The pain was evident in their eyes. The war had taken so much from them, but in the end, they had won. In the midst of the service, Major Roy stood up to speak. He cleared his throat, his voice cracking with emotion as he addressed the crowd. "We stand here today because of the bravery and sacrifice of those who aren't with us anymore. Bonner, Sarah, Drake, Mason. The list goes on. These were not just soldiers. They were our friends, our brothers and sisters. They fought for our future, for our children, for everything that we hold dear. They gave their lives so that we could live free. We owe them everything. Their sacrifices were not in vain. Earth has been saved. We stand on the threshold of a new era, one where we are no longer weak, no longer vulnerable. The alien forces have retreated and the threat is gone. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. We have learned that freedom is not something that can be taken for granted. We've learned that our survival, our future, is something we must fight for every day. And we will honor those we've lost by making sure their sacrifices never go forgotten." His words resonated with everyone in the room. It was a moment of reflection, a moment of remembrance. The crowd fell silent as Major Roy looked out at the faces of those who had made it through the war. The soldiers, the civilians, the families who had lost loved ones, all of them had endured unimaginable pain, but they had survived. And now, they would rebuild. The world outside was changing. Earth was recovering, but the scars of the war were still fresh. Cities were being rebuilt, families were reuniting, and the people who had once been divided by fear and uncertainty were now united. Earth was no longer just a planet struggling to survive. It was a planet that had proven its strength. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, and it had emerged victorious. The alien forces, their once unstoppable war machine now shattered, had retreated in defeat. The remaining alien ships, their power and control broken, drifted helplessly in space. The invaders who had once thought of Earth as nothing more than a prize to be conquered were now forced to retreat, their hopes dashed. They sent a message to Earth, a final plea for peace. The message was simple. They offered a permanent ceasefire and a promise to leave Earth in peace, acknowledging their failure and the strength of humanity. Major Roy read the message, his face grim. It was a strange thing to hear. The alien forces, who had been so ruthless, now begged for mercy. But Earth had no reason to trust them. The war had taught humanity a harsh lesson. Never take peace for granted. "No deal," Major Roy said firmly, turning to his commanding officer. "We don't trust them, not after everything they've done." His words were met with nods of agreement. The alien forces had invaded Earth, slaughtered thousands, and caused untold destruction. There could be no peace with such a power. The people of Earth had fought too hard, lost too much, to simply let the invaders walk away unpunished. "We've won," Major Roy continued, his voice steady. "But the war isn't over. Not for us. Not yet." The decision was made. Earth would not simply accept peace at face value. They would rebuild, they would prepare, and they would ensure that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The alien threat was gone for now, but Earth had learned a valuable lesson. They could not afford to be complacent. As Major Roy stood before his team once more, he felt a surge of pride. They had made it through the impossible. They had fought against an overwhelming force, and they had won. But even as the celebration of victory began, there was a sense of sadness that lingered. The war had taken too much. It had taken the lives of too many brave souls. He thought of his fallen comrades, those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Their faces would never be forgotten. He had seen things that would haunt him for the rest of his life: the death of his friends, the pain of watching his team struggle against an enemy they couldn't see, the weight of command, the burden of leadership. But through it all, they had endured. They had fought, and they had won. In the end, the victory was not just about defeating the alien invaders. It was about the strength of humanity, the determination to survive, to protect what mattered most, to never give up, no matter the odds. It was about the sacrifices that had been made, and the promise that those sacrifices would not be forgotten. The people of Earth would rebuild, and they would do so stronger than ever before. The war had been won, but humanity's true strength had been proven in the face of the greatest adversity. They had faced an enemy that seemed unbeatable, and they had triumphed. Major Roy took one last look at the stars, the vast expanse of space that had once been filled with fear and uncertainty. Now it was filled with the promise of a brighter future. Earth had survived. Humanity had won. And as long as they remembered the sacrifices that had been made, they would never lose sight of what truly mattered: their freedom.